Welcome to the webinar this evening. Please say hi on the chat. As you're probably aware, this is one of a series that we're doing all year. And what we're doing is we're looking up, hi Rachel, hi Jane there. What we're doing is we're going through the whole of the Foundations course, which was our flagship course, the very first in-depth video course we produced, which was 7 years ago, believe it or not. 7 years ago, we produced the course. So what we've been doing this year is we've been taking some time, we've been re-looking at everything because our understanding of shiatsu and how it might work and what we're doing has developed such a lot in the last 7 years. We thought it was about time that we had another fresh look at it. So yes, welcome to the webinar and thank you for tuning in. I've got a whole load of material for you, and I'll just put the slides up. So here we are, it's the channels this week, and it's module 5 of the Foundations course. We've actually renamed it Foundations 2 now because of the upgrade of the of these webinar series. So what we've got in store for you this evening, and I'll just flag it up, the first thing in the program is I'm gonna start off with a couple of polls just to find out about what you think the channels might be like, what they might be like, what they might consist of. And then I'm going to give you a kind of overview of all various different researches that have been done, because there's been really a lot of research done on trying to figure out what the channels are. The exciting thing is there's just been a very big review that's just come out literally this year on all the previous research, and it seems that as if we really are now getting a clear idea of what the channels are. And I think that's really important for us as practitioners because for many reasons. One, because it helps us with our visualization, like what are we actually doing when we press a meridian or a channel, what's actually happening. That can help a lot in terms of developing our technique. I think it's really important also, secondly, for education, so that when we're teaching students and they say, well, what is a meridian? Why are we learning this? We've got a clear explanation of what it is and how it works, kind of thing. And the third thing I find the most useful as well, one of the most useful things, is communicating with clients, because they say, well, how is this working? You know, what's actually happening? And if you've got a clear idea of what the channels are and how they may work, then that helps a lot. And I'm going to share with you, once we've done some of the looks through some of the slides, I'm going to share with you some self-shiatsu techniques based on some quite amazing results that I've had recently with clients. That's definitely been informed directly by my deeper understanding of how the channels actually are structured. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing, some practical work later on. So here we go. So let's see what we've got first of all. We've got this first poll. Okay, so the first thing is, do you think that the channels have a basis in anatomy? Okay, now there's a yes, no, or not sure answer to that. Just be interested to know if you think they do, or whether you think there's some other mysterious process going on that doesn't actually, or that we don't even know where they are. Let's just have a look and see what the consensus is. Okay, so here we go. We've got roughly 3/4 of you think the channels have a base anatomy, and about 1/4 of you think that they don't. Okay, so the second poll I've got is, if you answered yes to the first poll and you think they do have an anatomical explanation, which of the following do you think best explains them? Do you think it's muscles, nerves, circulation? That could be any type of circulation like lymph or blood, fascia, or other, if you've got another idea. Let me just run that and we'll see. And we'll just see what you think. Because actually all of those have been considered as explanations of the channels. So let's see what we've got. Okay, we've got 70% fascias coming out right on top there, followed by circulation, muscles. No one said nerves. Okay, but we've also got some others. So maybe we might want to put the others in the chat, and we can, or you can bring them up in the Q&A. We've got Kat on the questions. Flag up the questions. So maybe you've got some suggestions you might want to suggest later on as we go through. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so this is the overview of what I've got in store for you over the next 45 minutes or so, or 40 minutes. I tried to break it down. It's really hard to break it down because location, structure, and communication kind of overlap, as you'll see as we go through all the different research that's been done. So we've got some absolutely amazing, quite old experiments that give us visual evidence of the channels. And that was done, as you'll find out later, with isotopes. Also, diseases of the channels can give us a clue to the reality of the channels anatomically. A massive study on propagated sensation. I'm really amazed to find out about that, and I'll share that with you later. The circulatory system, okay, now that's an interesting one. Quite a few voted for that, so we'll have a look and think about that. And then there's interstitial fluid flow. That's another possibility. Mast cells, fascinating. Chemical characteristics, another bit of a surprise for me when I just did the research. And our favorite connective tissue, finally. In terms of communication, that's like, okay, the meridians or the channels are there, but how do they kind of work? Like when we press them, why does something happen? There's actually quite a lot of different theories on that, which I'll go over. But there's some of the best work visually is the Biophoton pictures, which you may have seen already if you've been following your energy work, because we've published them in various webinars. And also, going a bit deeper into the whole fascial things, we look into more the embryological things. So that's what we've got in store for you. And I've got resources for you that I can share with you that's got links to all the research papers that I used when I did the work for this webinar. And what it is a combination of the Foundations course material. And what I did was I revised and updated our Shiatsu, the Scientific Basis course, which we did a lot of research when we did that course into the research that had been done on the channels. And I've got that as a handout, which I'll give to you later on. Okay, which has got links to all of the stuff. Because to be honest, we would need a week to cover a lot of this. It's really going to give you just an overview and hopefully some practical hints in the next hour. There's just so much material. Okay, so here we go. This is the kind of questions that we were asking ourselves at New Energy Work when we kind of came up with the idea for developing the workshop and developing this webinar, developing the course. Okay, the questions are like, how can we explain the location of channels? Are they just kind of made up, or do they have some kind of basis in anatomy or something we don't know yet? And also, how can they link with the internal organs? I mean, why is this the lung meridian? Why is this the heart protector meridian? This is another big question, because when you feel the channels on the body, they all feel kind of similar when you actually feel the structure of them, but the function of them is very different. And the other thing, another question is like, what mechanisms would allow information to be transmitted along the channels? So in other words, you press here, okay, why would that affect someone's ability to breathe? 9, okay. And also, my big interest really is, how does all this influence our shiatsu? Because if we understand more deeply what's going on, the deeper we understand what's going on, the more we can refine our techniques through actually how we apply the techniques, how we assess the technique, how the techniques are received, and so on. Okay, so those were the kind of questions that we had at the back of our mind. And let's see how far we got to answering them. I'm not sure we got completely to the end yet. It's an evolving field, but let's start. Okay, so let's start off with location structure. And look at this. This is an amazing, quite early experiment, 1989. Okay, and what they did was they actually injected an isotope, that's radioactive material, into, can you guess which meridian? Yep, it's the lung meridian. Okay, and you can see that it lit up beautifully. Actually, it took a little while, which is interesting. Okay, it took a little while to travel all the way up the channel, and it actually illuminated the thyroid, and we'll come back to that later when we look at the functioning of the lung and so on. You notice that it illuminated the thyroid, and then it illuminated the lung organ, but it also went up kind of, it looks like it's going into the sinuses or something like that, into the throat. So basically, it lit up the lung channel. Super exciting. Okay, there was quite a small group there were healthy volunteers. Yeah, they did it along the 12 meridians. They did the healthy volunteers. They weren't ill or anything. And this is just one example. I think one of the most beautiful examples of illuminated lung meridian. The interesting thing about that 1989 study, though, is they had no idea, like, how, what, where is it going? Like, how is it going up there? How is it going up exactly where the Chinese medicine says the lung channel is? How is it going up there? And there's been all kinds of different theories, and some of them have been disproven, and some of them have been pretty much established now in the latest review, which we'll get to at the end, okay? So look at this. This is another fantastically interesting one. And again, from the 80s, 1986. And this is another Chinese Chinese research project. And what they did was they basically, because obviously they've got thousands, hundreds, probably millions of patients, and they basically just found anyone who had a disease that manifested along the channel. And this is a fantastic example there of the kidney meridian. You can see the kidney meridian just really well. You can see kidney 3, and you can see the whole kidney channel really clearly delineated all the way up the leg, and even right into the upper leg, where there isn't actually any points, you know, between kidney 10 and kidney 11. But look how clear it is, and it's black as well, isn't it? You know. Now, I have actually had clients that have had discoloration down the kidney channel like that in extreme fatigue situations. So I've had nothing as dramatic as that, but I have had similar things, and I've noticed it change, the color change, as the kidney channel kind of balances out. So that's another really interesting thing. So there's definitely something there. There's something there, but what is it? And why does it show up along the channel? Okay, now this is another even earlier and even more amazing experiment. It was done in China, and it was to do with propagated sensation. So basically what they did is they poked people on the meridians, and they asked them if they could trace the sensation. It's called propagated sensations along the channel, or PSC for short. It's a technical term, right? They thought it was the nervous system at the time, and they thought what was happening was that nerves would be activated. This was in the 70s. Nerves were really big in China, you know. And they thought that they would be able to trace the propagated sensation up the channels and show that the subjective experience of stimulating acupuncture points could be shown to go up the actual channel locations, right? They had 100,000 people. Can you believe that? It's got to be China. 100,000 people. But look at the results. So disappointing. Only 0.3%, although that's quite a lot out of 100,000, actually exhibited PSC. They also found they could block it manually, and I think this is really interesting. So even the people who could actually feel sensations up the channel when they got poked, so they got poked here, say, and could they feel it up here? They could be manually blocked by actually holding the, blocking the channel manually, and that would stop the sensation. So that made them think, maybe isn't the nerves, okay? But they didn't know exactly what it was. They thought it might be myoelectrical response, so some kind of electrical thing that was happening when it's pressed, but didn't really come to any conclusion about what could be happening to even that tiny number of people that could feel the propagated sensation along the channels, okay? Now that's really interesting. I just thought that was a fascinating study. Again, it didn't come to any conclusions, and the number of people who could feel it were quite small. Okay, so then circulatory system. Okay, now in terms of the actual blood circulation and the lymph, they couldn't correlate any PSCs to the blood, and so they didn't think blood circulation or the lymph, it wasn't correlated to PSC, so they didn't think that the circulatory system could be equated to the channels. And apart from really like the heart channel in the arm, which follows the radial nerve, and that's another whole story in the arm, there doesn't seem to be a very good correlation between the circulation system and the channels. So that was one of the things that was kind of eradicated in that PSC study. Okay, anyone heard of mast cells? Well, I hadn't until I did some of this research, but I found this very, very interesting, okay? Because they're found in the connective tissue. They're very, very important cells because they're extremely potent. They fight infections, they stabilize the inner body, They help you with allergies. And the interesting thing about them is that the distribution of mast cells follows the acupuncture channels. So I don't know how they found that out, but that's what I found out in some of the researches. And if you look at some of the resources, you can see the original papers that I got this from. Now, what I found very interesting about the mast cell thing was later on when I was researching the function of the sinew channels, which is another really interesting thing that I'd like to talk about a little bit more, maybe next time when we do the subos, is that the wei qi, that's the protective qi of the body, is supposed to circulate in the sinew channels. Now, that's really interesting because if you imagine the mast cells are basically linked to the wei qi. I mean, if they're used for fighting infections, they're part of, you know, the whole infection response of the body, then that's kind of in the area of the wei qi. And it's really interesting that they have been found to be distributed along channels because that kind of links with the Chinese version of the wei qi. So anyway, mast cells apparently are in the location of the channels. I wonder why that would be. Well, let's find out later on, hopefully. Now, look, this is another really interesting. You see, all this different research has been done, and they've all been trying to figure out what the hell is going on with the acupuncture meridians. And I just thought this was really interesting too, because the links there and the links also in the resources I'm going to share with you later. Calcium ions, the distribution of calcium ions is linked to the meridians, and they've measured an increase in calcium ions at the points that have been stimulated by acupuncture. So, some kind of chemical thing is going on there, okay? And there's also been research that link potassium and sodium ions, really important minerals in the body, to channels and points as well. But what about this? This is really interesting. Transcutaneous carbon dioxide emissions, that's kind of your skin breathing, has been mapped to the acupuncture points. And you can see some of that mapping here. Look, you've got the wrist there. Can you see that? You've got lung 9, lung 8, heart 7. That's 6, isn't it? 4, 5, and 6, all the way along there. All are kind of linear bands of infrared radiation linked to the channel locations. So you've got all kinds of things going on there. You've got mineral ions. You've got the breathing of the skin maps to the points, and you've got linear bands of infrared radiation going on there. So all kinds of interesting things going on around the points. So you can see the kind of breadth of research that has been done about that. Okay, now look, here we go. I was very excited to find this. As I was researching it over the last week, I've been researching this topic and updating myself. And guess what? There's actually a massive review that's just come out right now, 2024, and it's a huge review. And I've got through most of it, but you'll probably need to take a bit of time to read all the way through it. And it's really interesting because basically it comes to the conclusion that the fascia network is could be, it doesn't say it is, but it says it could be the anatomical basis for acupoints and meridians in the human body, 2024, right? And you can hear some of the graphics from the article that I've shared with you here. And these link later on when we look at the embryological work of Dr. Dan Keown. But look what they've done. They've done MRIs, scans right through the whole leg there, cross sections. They've mapped the fascial planes against the meridian locations. You can see that they've been doing that. And they've also been mapping bands of fascia all over the body there in the D section, in the C and D section. And if you, seriously, we would be here for a week if I went through the whole article. At least, it would take us at least a week. But I encourage you, if you want to look in more detail at the whole thing, then I'm going to share the resources with you later, and it's got a link directly to the article. The entire article and the graphics are all available by the publisher online, free, which is awesome, isn't it? Amazing. Okay, so now let's have a look at what we've got next. Okay, so now it's communication, and this kind of overlaps though with I think with with the structure, obviously, because the structure is involved in communication. And I'm still working on this. I have to say, even the last week, I've really been thinking a lot about how communication can occur, but we've got lots and lots of possibilities and threads. My personal view is that communication along the channels is multifaceted, and there's all kinds of things going on. We know a little bit about some of them. Okay, we already know about the calcium ions increasing with acupuncture and so on. Let's see what we've got here. Okay. Well, here's some of the things if you have done some webinars with us with the past, with say Patrizia, or maybe you've even studied our online Shiatsu the Scientific Basis course, which is available for subscribing members. It's right there on the dashboard for professional premium members, or maybe you've even purchased it in the past. You may have read it, and studied it. You will know that there's a lot of different theories about how communication occurs through the facial network. And actually, I haven't had a chance to list all of them because some of them are more biomechanical. But basically, one of the key books, which I've read myself, I've got it in the library next door in the library of the Shiatsu Center, is The Rainbow and the Worm by Mei Wan Ho. She's actually died now, sadly. But she wrote the standard text on the liquid crystal structure of fascia and how it's basically piezoelectric. So what happens is if you press the fascia, it actually creates an electrical charge. That electrical charge, it creates a biomagnetic field. That biomagnetic field will transmit through the facial network. So that kind of can explain why when you press or you put an acupuncture needle in a specific point on the fascia, then electrical signals or electrobiomagnetic signals will be transmitted along those liquid crystal structure. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, more into the quantum effects, we've had webinars in the past with Patrizia and Patrizia Stefanini, and she did a whole lecture tour through Europe with Dr. Emilio Giudici, who again, unfortunately, is no longer with us. And she's written papers about the whole idea that the special types of waves that don't degrade can actually be transmitted at a quantum level through the body system. So there's some papers there that you can read by Patrizia that are out there. So basically, and that doesn't even include the biomechanical aspects of fascia. So in other words, when we're moving around, the whole system of our body is communicating with itself through these through the signals that potentially can work through the facial network. So what happens is when we do body work, potentially, we change the structure of the body by using points, working on the muscles of fascia, and that transmits information back into the body mind. So there are definitely mechanisms there that have been suggested as ways that that the whole Shiatsu acupuncture system can work. And again, if you look at the resources, you'll see there's a lot more than we can possibly cover in one webinar. Okay, now here's another really interesting one. And this was interesting because you remember the first picture I showed you of the isotopes going up the arm. Remember I said that they up the lung channel and into the thyroid and into the lungs. And remember I said that it was quite slow and they couldn't figure it out, like how is it getting up there? And one of the ideas that they thought might be happening, because they did it, it's not the nervous system, it's not the circulatory system. So what is it? Okay. So there was a theory that it was interstitial fluid. So in other words, you've got all your cells in all your body tissue, and you've got interstitial fluid, which is, you can see, is the blue fluid around the cells. And the idea was somehow there was a channel somehow in the body system, and that the isotope kind of crept up through the body tissue, dodging around the cells, making it up the channel to the lungs. Okay, that was one of the theories. Okay, however, there's a very good bit of research that, and also our own personal experience, which thinks maybe not. Okay, because as I'm sure you're aware, when you're working with Shiatsu, sometimes the connections are extremely fast. So you might put your mother hand somewhere and you'll be pressing a point somewhere or working a channel somewhere, and you can feel an immediate connection, can't you, between the mother hand and the working hand through the two-handed technique. So there's got to be something faster going on than interstitial fluid flowing up through the between the cells and everything. Okay. And one of the bits of research that really, I think for me, really showed that to me, that is definitely not really going to cut it as an explanation, is this Biophoton experiment with Fritz Albert Popp. Okay, and these are famous pictures. I think they're always worth looking at again, and it's always very important to understand what they are showing and how it works, because what they did is they had a very special camera that measured biophoton emissions, and they're basically low levels of light that are transmitted out of the body. And actually, I haven't even mentioned that. That's another whole theory about communication. If you want to look up biophoton emissions and quantum information sent through biophoton emissions, it's another whole thing. But anyway, what they had was a special camera that could see whether biophotons were being emitted by the body. Okay. Now, the really interesting thing about this experiment was they put moxa. You can see where the moxa is being applied right on the sacrum there, okay? And they lit up, what's it called? Yeah, they heated up the area or stimulated the point with a moxa. And what happened was instantaneously the channels related to where they were putting the moxa lit up, okay? And when they took the moxa away, they stopped. So it's not a case of conduction. It's not like heat goes along a rod or a wire. Like, it wasn't that like the heat was going down through the interstitial fluid maybe or something. It wasn't that. Something was being lit up instantaneously by stimulating the points. And that is like, whoa, that is like, wow. Because, and the reason it's so exciting for us, I think, is because it's quite close to what happens when we do shiatsu. Especially like when we do quantum shiatsu or shiatsu, post-Mast shiatsu, when we're tuning in to the meridians. And in fact, it reminds me so much of what Pauline used to say, but she wasn't aware of this research. She used to say, light up the meridian, light up the meridian. And she would literally say, put your mother hand here, light up the meridian. And she would get you to imagine that stimulating the channel with the mother hand would somehow create an activation along the channel. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about that is that reminds us so much of the propagated sensations of the channel, doesn't it? But because it's not a nervous system thing, it's a very subtle thing for the receiver to feel. Some of the receivers can feel that. They'll say to you, oh, I can feel a sensation down the leg. I can feel this. I can feel something happening. But it's quite often they can't, because that activation of the channel is definitely not just a nervous system thing. Okay, so let's have a look at some other really interesting pictures from the same set. And look, I think this is one of the most fascinating ones of all, actually, because this was moxa was stimulating stomach 36. You can see that on the right leg of the model. And look what happened on the left leg. You've got spleen 9 and down from spleen 9 lighting up. Okay, absolutely incredible. And you can see the channel nicely lit up all the way down there, down towards the foot. You can see stomach 44 there. It looks like it's creeping a little bit over into the liver channel to me, but you can see it going down the stomach channel and lighting up the spleen on the other leg, which is a long way away from the moxa there. Okay, and then we've got the stomach channel again. We've got another bit of stomach channel being lit up in a similar way. Now, this is one of the most interesting things that links with Dr. Dan Keown's work. I'd like you to just check this out, because if you've come across Dr. Dan Keown before, you may even have his book, which I've got right here, The Uncharted Body. I've done several webinars with him in the past. And in fact, I've got some work that we did with him that features on the Foundations course, if you want to check it out. But he is really big on the 6 divisions and how the 6 divisions work embryologically. And the interesting thing for me is, look, they stimulated the stomach channel. You can see that, right? But look what's lit up in the arm. You can see the large intestine channel is lit up in the arm. And that is really strong indication that the stomach and the large intestine channel are somehow connected energetically. Bearing in mind, of course, that Masunaga himself, if you think of that classic Masunaga chart, was very much aware of the 6 divisions, and pretty much 70% of the Masunaga meridian extensions follow the 6 division pathways. And more on that later when we start looking at the fascial planes and how they connect with the channels in the leg. Okay, so lots of exciting things here. Instantaneous lighting up of the meridian by stimulating the meridian, 6 divisions, connections, yin-yang connections in the leg. And there we go, had a channel on the back of the leg. Really interesting stuff. Okay, so now we get to Dr. Dan Keown's work. And again, we'd need a week, or you need to read this book, which I've done myself. And so I'm just going to give you the highlight of this and what it means. Basically, he really did a great job, I think, linking up Western and Chinese medicine. You may be aware of his book, The Spark in the Machine, which was a best-selling book on Amazon. And I love the subtitle, which says, The Science of Acupuncture Explains the Mysteries of Western Medicine, which I thought was a really great thing. Because his whole idea is basically Chinese medicine had it all nailed thousands of years ago, and we're just catching up in the West. And coming from a medical doctor, that's always kind of nice to hear. But he also studied acupuncture. But the most interesting thing in terms of Dr. Dan Keown's history is that his father was a surgeon, and surgeons all know lots about the fascial planes. And the reason for that is because the fascial planes are really hard to cut through. So if you're doing any type of surgery, you avoid them as much as you can and try and get along them and everything. To such an extent that you may be aware that in Western medicine, when they do operations or when they want to get inside the body cavity, is they often put carbon dioxide, they put a gas inside the body, which blows up the fascial planes and creates an actual, where the fascial planes connect, it creates an actual space that they can look through and find out what's actually going on. Okay. So basically what Dan has done is he's mapped the embryological development of the human being, how it occurs into different layers, how those different layers develop into the 6 divisions, and how the fascial planes radiate out from the internal organs and into the limbs. And if you really are interested, you can read this book, and it will basically pretty much explain why all of the channels, classical Chinese channels anyway, are where they are. And it's certainly the most convincing explanation that I've found so far. And it matches up directly with that 2024 review that I just mentioned earlier, with all the MRI scans and everything. So it looks like it's really converging. The understanding of the location of the channels is really starting to converge around the fascial planes. So what exactly are they? Well, if you look at the cross section of the leg there, all right, you'll see you've got all the muscles and the bones and everything. But between the muscles, you have got fascial planes, okay, and they are embryologically developed. They form right from the embryo and go out into the limbs, and those planes link in to the internal organs. So when we do the practical in a little bit, in 5 minutes or something, I'm going to show you how you can actually feel those on your own body, because when I actually figured that out and started feeling them on my clients, it made a huge difference to how I understood what I was doing, and also the techniques that I used when I actually was doing my shiatsu. Okay, so that's the explanation of why the meridians are where they are, and we'll do a little bit more of that later on. Okay, you wanted to have a look at them. Okay, and look, here is one. Okay, this is I've actually got a video of this, a video of blowing up the putting the gas in between the fascial planes, and that's actually part of the liver meridian. So you can see it. What's what it looks like when you expand it up with gas. You can put a camera down there, and you can see those fascial planes like that. And some of the things that can go wrong are, you know this from Chinese medicine, you can get damp and blood and stuff like that in the channels. And there's an example of actual blood in the actual liver channel there, because you can see that red bit of blood there, and that shouldn't be there. It should be nice and clean and unobstructed, okay? And again, another whole load of research that you can that I can link you to and you can read up about is there's a whole emerging science now related to how problems with the facial planes can directly link to inflammation, movement issues, and pain. And there's a whole area of research that indicates that quite a lot of pain, particularly lower back pain, has its origins in facial dysfunction rather than in muscular stiffness and things like that. And that, I think, is very exciting, because what that does is that confirms our experience as shiatsu practitioners of, say, treating a lower back pain by working down the bladder channel, say, or the kidney channel, or the liver channel, whichever channel is involved. They all link into the facial planes around the back and into the internal pathways, internal cavities of the body. And so if you imagine that one of the things we're doing when we do shiatsu is regulating the energy movement, or even the movement of fluids, or whatever it is, along the correct movement of the facial planes, and how that can influence things like lower back pain, is another whole area which we could definitely spend another whole webinar on. So that's what it looks like. And this is Dan Keown's kind of image of what it's like. So this is really interesting, I think, because what it does is he links the main channels, in other words, the facial plane channels, or the jing channel, with the connecting channels that go out into the connective tissue, but also the connection, which we'll do in a minute, I think it's the next slide, between the jing channels, the main channels, and the sinew channels. Because when we're doing shiatsu, quite a lot of the time we're working on the sinew channels. And I'd like to, again, in the practical, make sure I leave time for this, I'd like to get you to actually feel the difference on yourself, so that next time you do a shiatsu, you can go, oh, I'm working sinew channel, or oh, I'm right into the whole jing channel there, okay? So the main thing, and this is the big light bulb moment, everyone, okay, is that the channels are really no thing. They are actually spaces. The channels are not space, they're not things like blood flow, nerves, lymph vessels, whatever. They are the spaces in the body. And that's why they couldn't find them, because you have to look at where there isn't anything. So if I go back here to this slide, you see the anatomy, traditional anatomy focuses on the muscles and the bones and everything like that. And the facial planes are kind of ignored, but they are the spaces in the body where communication occurs and where lots of functional things happen and lots of diseases can happen. And so that was the big light bulb moment. And Dan Keown's really, really excited about that in his book, and the recent research seems to follow that up. That is definitely the best explanation we have so far. Okay, and here's actually directly from his book. I've just taken a little screenshot of this, an image from his book that he presented on a previous webinar with us. So we have the actual lung channel itself, the jing channel. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, I want to feel my jing channel in the arm. Okay, so I'm going to show you what it's like, okay, right now, before we do anything else, okay. I'll just take this off and I'll show you, okay. Right, if you get your arm, okay, you've got your arm, and you've got lung 5, I find that the easiest one to work it, okay. So you've got lung 5, that's a pretty good angle shot, isn't it? Yeah, look, there's my lung channel. If you get lung 5 like this, turn your hand around like that, and then you'll feel a groove, right? And if you go up here like this, you'll feel, and I'll show you exactly where it is on my arm, you'll feel this groove there, okay? Can you feel that on your own arm? I hope you're doing it at home. I'm watching you. Look, can you see where my finger's going in? That is the jing, that's the main facial plane space where the lung channel exists. And if I put the slide back up, you'll see what I mean. Here we go. Okay, you see, you go up from lung 5 and it goes right between those two muscles there, right all the way up. You get right onto the pectoral muscles, and then there's a groove that goes there. Okay, now once you, the deltoid muscle, when you get onto the pectoral muscle, the facial plane is obscured by the pectoral muscles, but you can actually get in there. And I've actually got a video of them cutting in there and putting a camera up, because there's actually a connective tissue pathway that goes, facial plane pathway that goes directly from round lung 1 and 2 up directly into the thyroid, and it's used in operations and stuff like that. They can put things up there. So yeah, so that's your jing channel. Just do the little picture again. We got that? Yeah, so there's your jing channel. That's the kind of like a diagrammatic view. That's what it looks like on the lung, okay? And this is what it's actually like. Look, that is my lung channel, people. You can feel it, absolutely. Now, what happens is, if you then spread your awareness out, and I'm going to put my fingers a little bit flatter here, this is what would happen if you were palming up the lung channel. You'd actually feel more the sinew channel. So you'd feel the implications or the repercussions of any obstructions of flow in that primary facial plane channel, if that makes sense. So in other words, if you've got an obstruction or something here, you might get an archie point, a local sore point that obstructs the muscles because of that connection outwards from the jing channel out into the sinew channel. Okay, so there we are. See, he says the jing channels constantly nourish the sinew channels, and when the organ becomes distressed, the sinew channels can suffer too, resulting in poor nourishment and the presence of archie points. And that's why you're going to get stiffness and pain sometimes down the channel when you get into organ things. And even, as we saw earlier, you might even get dramatic lines happening along the channels. That's quite rare, but it can happen. Okay. So, hey, hooray, I've left just enough time. I really want to show you this. You felt your lung meridian. Hope you enjoyed that. And so now I would like to show you how you can feel your kidney meridian. And the reason I want to show you this is because I've had a couple of really interesting successes recently treating plantar fasciitis, which is really difficult to treat in my experience. I've not had much luck with it at all. But I've had 2 clients recently where I've been able to make quite a bit of difference, because I understood the relationship between the facial planes of the kidney channel, having done this research. Okay, so I'd like to show you what I did with the clients, and I want you to experiment on yourself. And the reason I'm picking this one is because, believe it or not, I was working it, and the client actually said, it feels like you're blowing air into it. And I thought, oh, well, that's the power of visualization. I was imagining those Dr. Dan Keown pictures where it's blown up. I was imagining it as I was working the channel. And the client actually said, it feels like you're blowing it up. What happened was, as the facial planes separated, and it was uncomfortable, it was quite painful as I did it, it felt like I was blowing up. And by the time I finished, the whole foot and ankle, as well as some other work I did, made a huge difference to the functioning of the foot. And as I say, on 2 occasions, I've managed to get some progress with plantar fasciitis. So why don't we find out exactly what our kidney meridian feels like? Now, we've already got a bit of an indication, haven't we? Because do you remember the picture I showed you earlier with a big black line up it from that Chinese research? Okay, so that gives you an idea if you've forgotten where your kidney channel is. I'm sure you haven't. So let's see if we can find it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my leg here. And I'd like you to do the same thing. You can find kidney 3. And if you go directly up from kidney 3 and feel around, you will feel a groove there, just like you did here coming up from the lung, okay? And that groove is the kidney channel, people, okay? That's the fascial plane connection. And if you find kidney 3, go up, find that groove, okay? And now I'll show you what I did. I used lots of key projection, quite a bit of pressure, and I imagined going right in. Now you see, if I do that, I can actually feel a sensation in kidney 10. And I think that's because right on the fascial plane, you may feel the same thing yourself. I can feel it right up into here. See, so that's a propagated channel sensation, people. See if you can get it yourself, okay, by doing it, by pressing in. Okay, and what I did is I worked up here. I kept my mother hand on the sole of the foot here, so I could feel what was happening to the information, particularly around the heel, actually. And let's see if you can do it. Okay, so get into a comfortable position, find that groove, project your chi in, and see if you can get a sensation, just like I am now. I'm getting a sensation that I'm kind of blowing air into that space. I can feel a sensation here. Okay, and I can also feel a sensation down into the fascia on the sole of the foot. Okay, so if you follow it up, see how you get on. See if you can follow it all the way up. There we go. There we are, look. Can you see that? Same kind of thing as we had on the arm. I showed you on the arm. And then we get up into kidney 10. Okay, so that's your kidney meridian, okay? And of course, if we go further out from there and we feel the sinew meridian, you'll get an idea of the condition of the actual sinews, the fascia and the muscles either side of it that are connected to the jing channel. Okay, so just put my stuff together and let's see what else I've got for you on these slides. Let's have a look. Okay, so that's just Q&A. Look, we're doing really well for time. It's only 10 minutes to. I don't know if there's any questions. And otherwise, let me just see what I've got here. Oh yeah, here we go. So here's these links and resources. Look, here's the there's that review of evidence suggesting that the fascial network could be the anatomical basis for acupuncture meridians in the human body. It's quite a big mouthful, isn't it? And that's actually very generously been published online by Wiley. And I can share a copy of this with you. Here we go, links and resources, and you can download it. And obviously we'll put it online as well. Oops, yeah, there we go. Yeah, good, okay. So yeah, so, and there's the some other studies there, some earlier systematic reviews. We've got Defining Meridians and Modern Basis for Understanding from Science Direct. We've got Meridian Studies in China, systematic review. How about this one? Wave-induced flow in meridian demonstrated using photoluminescent bioceramic material on acupuncture points. That's a mouthful, isn't it? And then we've got speculations about bystander and biophotons. There we are. There's a biophoton signaling, which I mentioned earlier, between DNA cells, which is kind of linked with some of Pop's work. Right. Okay. So we've got a question here from Carol. Thank you, Carol. Yeah. I wonder how, let's have a look. I wonder how the ancients knew where the meridians points were before technology. That's a very good question, isn't it? And I think you may have almost certainly heard about these archaeological discoveries of, I think it was someone frozen in the permafrost, wasn't it, that had acupuncture points tattooed on their body. So from thousands of years ago. My own feeling is a combination of different things. I think one of the things is that because we're very much a visual and a rational culture, we're not so body aware, and we're not so linked in and internally with our body as they were in the past. And if you think that acupuncturists traditionally were Qigong masters, so you had to study Qigong to an extremely high level, that would give you a much more direct kinesthetic sense of your body, much more than we get in the West, unless of course we're shiatsu practitioners like us. And then you can be guaranteed that we're developing that as much as we can. But seriously, in the past, acupuncturists had to be really, really good at Qigong. So there's partly that, and also don't forget that slide I showed you of the illnesses that showed up on the channels. Now you've only got to have a few of those to make you really start thinking, well, there's definitely something going on there. I mean, that kidney channel was just completely drawn out in the body. So there's that. There's kinesthetic awareness. There's the actual manifestations of disease along the channels. But the other thing that I think is really interesting as well is energy, what we would call energy perception, in other words, palpation. And again, if you think that traditional doctors, traditional healers tended to be body workers, so they tended to be experts of actually feeling the body. And as we've done this evening, I hope you enjoyed that. We've actually felt our lung channel and we felt our kidney channel. I hope it wasn't the first time you've ever felt it, but maybe the first time you felt it in that way. I don't know. Yeah, so you would have that correlation. That correlation between physical diseases, emotional diseases, that's where Chinese medicine is so strong, and actual connections in the body. So that's how I think it was slowly built up. But it is, and it took thousands of years as well, by the way. But some brilliant insights. Okay, so is the bladder a sinew channel? I had really bad cramp the other night. Recognizable bladder points. Yeah, because all the channels have sinew channels. Okay, and if you look in our lovely tome here, which is our major reference, remember this one, the Manual of Acupuncture, you'll notice that all of the channels have sinew channels. So I opened it up for lung because I thought someone might be interested in that. And here's the lung sinew channel. Look. But all the channels have sinew channels. And if you give me a second, I will look it up for you and see whether that makes sense with your cramping. Yeah, here we go. So there's the traditional channel. Okay, this is out Peter Dedman's book. And then you can go over here. Yes, okay, so there we are. This is the sinew channel. So, and you can see how it kind of like goes down there, connects down into the foot and either side of the actual channel. You see how it splits as well, interestingly, at the bottom there. So yeah, absolutely, they all have sinew channels. But it's certainly, from my own experience, it's really helped me clarify what I'm doing when I'm doing shiatsu. Like, am I tuning in more to the sinew channels? Am I tuning into the fascial plane, the jing channel? Because particularly when you're treating it particularly affects me when I'm doing work that influences the internal organs, if that makes sense. So if I'm working, say I'm working on someone who's got breathing problems and my mother's hand is on, say, bladder 1 and 2, and I want to affect the actual functioning of the lungs, say I'm working like 5, then I'm going to go straight in here and I'm going to work the jing channel and I'm going to monitor what's happening inside the lungs with my mother hand by scanning in, okay? And in the same treatment, you might find that client has an obstruction. It's very common to have obstruction in the upper thoracic, okay? And maybe tension around the pectoral muscles, which again is very common with lung breathing problems where you get this kind of thing. So then what I'm doing then is I'm using our Shi points on the sinew channels, and I've got a different focus then. I'm not focusing so deeply into the facial spaces to go through the embryonic pathway into the organ. I'm more concerned with connecting along the actual sinew channel. So I've got the Arshi points, I've got points that I'm finding along the channels, if that kind of makes sense. Okay, great. I just wonder if there's any more questions. Let's have a look. Yeah, great. Okay, so I wonder if there's any other questions? Otherwise, we can just finish up. We've only got 5 minutes to go, and I just wanted to say a few little things, just see if I've got a couple, I think one more slide. Let's have a look. Yeah, so that's the links and references. I updated that, especially for you, okay? And this is about the next webinar because, of course, we have to kind of rethink what the hell we're doing when we're doing SUBOs. And there's, again, been lots and lots of research on what I found. Some of it I've touched on, actually, this evening. I've touched on some of the research about what happens on acupuncture points. But next time, we'll go in much deeper about what's going on, what the relationship is between certain acupuncture points and the way the fascial planes operate and how that might explain why they're used for certain things. So there we are. Right, okay, good. Lovely, thank you, Shudava. Yes, exactly. I would just, as you can imagine, yeah, here we are. Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely read the stuff about Dankyo, read the papers, really interesting. There's so much coming out, and we're trying to, that's the whole purpose of new energy work, really. Yes, there is a class next Tuesday. I think it's a professional development class, Kim, so you'll be getting an email about that any minute. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so basically that's the whole purpose of new energy work. We try and combine going deeper into the Chinese medicine, and also just keeping you updated because the field is like changing all the time. New stuff is coming up, and it's just so cool. Yeah, the sinew channels and the muscle meridians are the same kind of thing. And yes, exactly. There we are. Yeah. All right, everyone. Great. Okay. Have a really good evening. Have a good week, and we'll see the professional and premium members next week on the. And if you haven't joined yet, why not subscribe? And you can help the whole show keep on the road. Thank you to our professional and premium members for your subscription. That's why we're here. And if you're a free member, it's great to have your support as well. So thank you very much, Kat. Thank you, Diana. I can see you've been there chatting away in the background as well. And yeah, we'll put this webinar recording and the slides and everything up on the Foundations 2 course, and we'll see you for the next one in October and try and go a bit deeper into SUBOs. Okay, everyone. Have a great evening.